Hello, everyone. My name is Kathy Aros, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson. Thank you so much for joining us today for our voter education program on redistricting. The 2020 United States redistricting cycle will take place following the completion of the 2020 United States Census. In all 50 states, various bodies will draw their state legislative districts. The rules for redistricting vary from state to state, but all states draw new legislative and congressional maps, either in the state legislature, in redistricting commissions, like what we have here in Arizona, or through some combination of state legislature and a redistricting commission. Though various laws and court decisions have put constraints on redistricting, many redistricting institutions continue to practice gerrymandering, which involves drawing new districts with the intention of giving a political advantage to specific groups. Partisan control of redistricting institutions can provide a party with major advantages. For the most part, districts drawn in the 2020 redistricting cycle with population counts as determined by our recent census will remain in effect until the next round of redistricting following the 2030 US Census. All Arizona residents, not just citizens, have a stake in how our important topic. US Census, Nahrin Jabru. Nahrin is Special Assistant Pima County Supervisor Betty Villegas and assisted both Supervisor Richard Elias and Supervisor Villegas in chairing Pima County's 2020 Census Complete Count Committee. Her focus was on creating outreach strategies with 30 different organizations working with hard to count populations. Next, you are hearing from Cindy Soffrin, a fellow league member on our Speakers Bureau and resident expert on gerrymandering. After retiring, Cindy and her husband moved to Tucson from the Washington, D.C. area. She had a career in auditing and fiduciary estate accounting while working for KPMG International Cooperative, a multinational professional services network. Last but not least, Colleen, who will be the Arizona Redistricting, speaking from direct experience. She was the chair of the Arizona Independent Districting Commission in 2007. She has her master's in environmental management at Yale University, BA in economics, is an affiliate of the Institute of Quantitative Science, Harvard, and is at Willett. Now for some instructions on how to ask questions. You can submit your questions anytime during the presentations, but our Q&A session will take place after our three speakers have finished speaking. To repeat that, it's fine to submit your questions anytime. Now, to submit a question, find the Q&A button. Move your cursor to bring up the menus at the bottom of your screen. Find the Q&A icon and click on it. When the Q&A panel opens, type your question directly into the box. When you are finished, click Enter. That's it. Another league member will be collecting the questions and communicating them with our moderator. Now, if you happen to be watching on Facebook and you have a question, we're also monitoring that, so you can just type in a comment and we will be looking for that. So let's get started. At this time, I would like to introduce today's moderator and our program's chair, Vivian Hart.
Hello, I am very pleased to be here. I am Vivian Hart, the chair of the program committee of the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson. We are very glad that you have joined us today. We have three excellent speakers who will talk to us about the whole situation having to do with the redistricting. We're going to start out first with Nahrin Jabru. And Nahrin will talk to us about the 2020 Census Complete Count Committee. She was intimately involved in that. So please, Nahrin, please start.
Thank you. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So thank you for having me. I am Nahrin Jabru, and I worked for Chairman Richard Elias prior to his passing on March 28th of 2020. He was the chair of the 2020 Complete Count Committee. And after he passed away, Supervisor Betty Villegas was appointed to his position, and she took over the chair of the Census Complete Count Committee. The "we are not invisible" quote came from Chairman Richard Elias. He wanted to make sure that hard to count populations were not invisible and that they were counted. So the goals of the 2020 Census Complete Count Committee was to promote the value of census data, to increase census promotion within our organizations and at community events, and to ultimately get closer to a complete count by educating hard to count populations and encouraging their participation in the census. So hard to count populations, some examples are individuals living in poverty, children, especially the 0 to 5 ages, people experiencing homelessness, non-English speakers, immigrant or refugee populations, including the undocumented, people who are just uninterested, rural area residents, frequent movers and renters, and people who fear or mistrust the government. We had several organizations as a part of our Complete Count Committee who had access to these hard to count populations. These are just some examples, definitely not everyone, but we did have the tribes, the Tohono O'odham Nation, Pasquayaqui tribe, Mi Familia Vota. We had Amphi School Board, Sunnyside School Board, the YWCA, the libraries, Arizona Bilingual, Literacy Connects, Arizona Coalition for a Change, Keep Tucson Together. They have a lot of access to the undocumented populations. LULAC, of course, the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson, the Pima Council on Aging, the Dunbar Pavilion, One Arizona, NALEO, Census Counts, who is a part of Leadership Conference Education Fund. We had a faith-based representative and several state and local representatives. This is, I'm going to show some pictures of some of our meetings prior to the start of the pandemic. You can see our late chairman in the very back with his popular smile. And here we are again. On the very far left, we have Maria Vianney Cardenas, who worked for the Census Bureau, and she was our go-to representative and helped us with getting the hard to count populations counted. And then we experienced many challenges during it was about 2 years we were working on the census prior to its deadline. So some challenges we experienced was the citizenship question. There has never been a citizenship question, I think, for many decades. And the citizenship question created a lot of mistrust So there were, organizations who were even asking people to boycott the question completely, to answer their census, but to boycott the question completely, so that people who are undocumented or who were not citizens wouldn't be targeted in some way. The citizenship question did not make it onto the final census questionnaire. The COVID-19 pandemic was extremely challenging because it created a lot of challenges as far as getting the word out. So we had planned on doing a lot of in-person events where we were going to promote the census, give out swag, give out food, and talk to people one-on-one and to groups. But that was put on hold, and we didn't really start promoting the census at events until the very, very last days. The moving of the deadline for self-response and enumerator operations was also very challenging. It created a bit of a panic within the Complete Count Committee because we weren't sure exactly what our last day was. So because of the pandemic, we had a change of plans. We emphasized a lot on media, so radio and TV were highly utilized. We put a lot of funding into radio ads and TV commercials, especially for Spanish language. Mail, we distributed a lot of mail, emails and mass mailings. The mass mailings, we included places where people could get tested for COVID-19 for free, as well as masks, washable masks. Social media was highly utilized. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter was the most utilized. Door-to-door canvassing was used, although it was minimal and somewhat discouraged. Phone was used a lot, so we did a few teletown halls where we had the mayor, Supervisor Villegas, school board members, and superintendents speak at these teletown halls about the importance of participating in the census, as well as phone and text banking. We used food distribution events heavily. These were at faith-based organizations, at the local libraries, and at schools, where we were able to give away census promotional material with, as well as do mobile questionnaires where we had mobile devices where we were able to assist people with answering their questionnaires on the spot. We also used newsletters to promote the census, posters, and placing brochures on public counters. And we also used public service announcements. I'm going to go ahead and share one of our first public service announcements that we used. Bear with me one moment. So this was the first PSA we did. It was not scripted, and we just had it edited, and it was done by Chairman Richard Elias.
Hi everybody, I'm Richard Elias. I'm the chairman of the Pima County Board of Supervisors. Every 10 years here in America, we count everybody who lives in the United States. So starting in March, we're going to start counting everybody. It's important that you participate for a whole bunch of different reasons. But maybe most importantly, it's about the money that we share as taxpayers to fund housing, to fund transportation, to fund a whole bunch of public health projects that take place in this country. All in all, it's almost $700 billion worth of funding that we share. It's very important that you're not invisible. But also, it's about political representation and making sure that we're represented in the House of Representatives the way we should be. Don't worry, your information is private, and we really need you to participate because we don't want anyone to be invisible.
So we also did a commercial with Supervisor Betty Villegas, and this one was on Spanish TV.
El recuento de censo ocurre cada 10 años y nos ayuda a obtener una parte justa de los fondos federales para nuestra comunidad, para servicios como atención médica, vivienda, trabajo y educación. Complete su formulario de censo y recuerde contar a todos que viven en su casa. Visite 2020census.gov. Tú cuentas, yo cuento, todos contamos.
So we relied heavily on these PSAs and did quite a few of them with trusted leaders in our community, as well as younger populations that allowed us to get access to the hard to count populations. And then we also we also had to transition to Zoom meetings after the pandemic. So this is a terrible picture, but we continued to meet after the pandemic started. And then we started using our monies in different ways. So we started creating posters in English and Spanish to put out into the community, and we focused on areas that had low counts. So there were certain zip codes in Pima County that were severely low counts. And so we put posters in those areas. We also, during the last days of enumeration, engaged in some tabling events where we did mobile questionnaires. And these were highly focused in areas that had low counts. So the national self-response rate ended at 67%. And in the state of Arizona, it looked like it was at 64.1%. Pima County led the self-response rate among all other counties in Arizona. So we did do all right, but the pandemic definitely presented its challenges to us and other counties. Most people responded by internet. This was the first census that we were able to respond by internet, mail, and by phone. So most people did utilize the internet, and then the second one was by mail. And so this is just a comparison of the self-response rates by state, and Arizona ending at 64.1%. And then we have what's next in 2021. So there's going to be the state population counts, the projected release on December 31st, redistricting counts, post-enumeration surveys, and that will measure the quality of the 2020 census and produces the undercount and overcount. The end of data collection, October 2021, and the projected release. Ongoing monthly surveys, so that'll be the American Community Survey, and then the field representative interviewer positions region-wide. And I will stop sharing my screen. So the just to end the complete count committee facilitation, it was definitely something challenging for me. I didn't have any experience in this type of work, so it was definitely new. There were a lot of things I probably would have done differently. I am excited for the next census, even though it's going to be in 10 years. But you know, just learning from everything, it was definitely, there were definitely a lot of learning experiences that I would change, and I mean, the pandemic and losing Chairman Richard Elias was probably the biggest challenge, but we got through it, and we did the best that we could. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nahrin. I can see that these were challenges that were not thought that you'd ever have to face this year, but they were great challenges, and as far as I can tell, you overcame them very well. And now we are going to hear from Cindy Soffrin. She has been a member of the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson for many years, and she has been on the Speakers Bureau for the last 3 years. And she has presented about gerrymandering to a number of community organizations around the Tucson area. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity today. My name is Cindy Soffrin, and I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to speak today about gerrymandering. It's a very important topic which we are trying to cure in the United States. The definition is to manipulate the boundaries of an electoral constituency so as to favor one political party or class over another. Or, in other words, how representatives pick their voters instead of voters picking their representatives. Just the basics. The House of Representatives has 435 members, and that it's capped at 435. They are allocated among the states per the population, which, as you can see, the census is very important. Each member represents a specific district in the state, and a representative's term is 2 years. The district boundaries are usually drawn by state legislatures, but that is changing, and we'll discuss that later. The criteria for drawing districts is delineated in the Constitution. So it's based on the census taken every decade of all residents, and that is stated in Article 1, Section 2. Originally, each district had to include 30,000 residents, and now it's up to 700,000 residents. And since 1965, the only factor that must be considered is race, so as to assure that minorities are properly represented. It started way back in the day of Patrick Henry in 1788. He wanted his, he was the former governor of Virginia, and he tried to convince the state legislature to redraw Virginia District 5 so as to benefit his preference for the fourth president, who was James Monroe.
Cindy,
yes.
You need to share your screen.
It is shared. I have it shared.
You don't see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. How did that happen? I have share screen.
There it is.
Yeah, but where's my PowerPoint now? Okay. Is that better?
Yes, now we can see it. Thank you. Sure.
I'm sorry. He wanted James Monroe to be the fourth president, but even though they did redistrict the 5th District of Virginia, James Madison still won. The newspaper said that that was a practice. The practice was a violation of the one man, one vote. At the time it was men. Okay, so we move on. In 1812, Eldridge Gerry was the governor of Massachusetts. He wanted to redistrict his state in order to keep his party in power. So he approved the map. And as you can see here in the light gray, that's what the districts look like. And somebody said, it looks like a salamander. And his friend said, no, it's a gerrymander. And that name stuck. Moving on, 1842, Congress passed the Apportionment Act, which required these states to divide their property into districts. Before that, they could either have a general election for representatives or divide it into districts. But this law said that you had to divide it into districts. And in 1965, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, which was part of the Civil Rights Act and had many consequences, one of which being that the states that were considered to have voting procedures that were discriminatory came under the auspices of the federal government. There was a requirement that was in there that they had to fulfill. And if they didn't fulfill it, they had to report back to the government every time they changed their voting procedures. Unfortunately, in 2013, there was a lawsuit, Shelby versus Holder, and that oversight was considered unconstitutional, and it took all the teeth out of the Voting Rights Act. So the arguments used to support gerrymandering are not true. Severe partisan gerrymandering is common, as you can see in these examples. 2012 in Illinois, there were more Democrats registered, but there were less Democrats registered than the number of representatives that were voted into the House of Representatives. In 2014 in Pennsylvania, the reverse. There were fewer Republicans who were Pennsylvanians, but the Republicans held 72% of the congressional seats. So it's not over. I could give you more examples, but we don't have the time today. The arguments against gerrymandering was it violates the core principle of the Constitution, well, one man, one vote. In this case, one human, one vote. That conflicts with the First Amendment, freedom of speech. When you choose your political party, that's considered a freedom of speech. And if you're discriminated against, then they've taken away your First Amendment right. And finally, it conflicts with the 14th Amendment also, the interpretation of the equal protection under the laws. This has to do with whether you as a minority in a district have influence over the majority. And it's only done by fair districting. Now, the districts are drawn in most states by state legislatures. Arizona and California currently have an independent commission, yay. Florida in 2016, I believe, had 2 state constitutional amendments that were passed by voter initiative. The state legislature said, that's nice, and just went back to gerrymandering. So the League of Women Voters and others had to sue them in order to get them to stop gerrymandering. And just this 2018, Ohio, Utah, Michigan, and Missouri voters authorized an independent commission. However, Missouri has a little star by it because they also passed in 2020, just beginning of the month, Amendment 3 that removes some of the protections of that Amendment 1. We'll see how that works out. So how does it work? The goal is to describe a district that will elect a certain type of politician to accomplish a desired result. Sometimes it has consequences in that you have some weird districts, and here's one right here in green, the border of which is a highway. So it can get pretty strange when you do gerrymandering. Here's how it works. You have 30% blue, you have 20% orange. If you do it the right way, you have 3 representatives for blue and 2 representatives that are of the orange party. But it doesn't always work that way. You have this one where there are still the same number of blues and the same number of oranges, but by doing the districts the other way, the orange gets no representatives in the House of Representatives. And these are the weird districts, and you have more blues than oranges, but the way these are drawn, you only have 2 blue representatives and 3 orange representatives. So these are the ways that gerrymandering can take place. It's done by packing, where you concentrate all voters of one type in a single district, or you can crack them and spread them around so that they don't have any influence through their state. There's the hijacking, where you can redraw 2 districts and make 2 incumbents of the same party run against each other, whereas only one can win. And you have kidnapping, where you move the boundary of an incumbent or a possible rival into a different district. And in that way, they don't have their base, their interest base. So those are the ways that you can gerrymander. Now, extreme gerrymandering, of course, takes a computer. So you can draw a district with just the right number of a particular voter to win those districts. You can tell extreme gerrymandering because the results of the election are unlikely. You can review the legislators' emails and their letters and what they say on TV. And the technology that is used to draw those maps can also be used to detect extreme gerrymandering. These are some of the past US Supreme Court actions, and I believe I'm running out of time, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but they decided what was considered an equal district, and it turns out that it's within 10% of population. Described how to prove violations of the Voting Rights Act. It outlined the process of moving the redistricting cases through the court system. The Supreme Court said that you have to start at the lowest court level. Partisan gerrymandering was deemed non-justiciable, which means they couldn't tell what partisan gerrymandering was, where we just found out that they could. And they declared independent redistricting commissions were constitutional, which was very important. That was an Arizona case. Now, the current actions that may affect gerrymandering are in Arizona. We have, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, so I think I'm going to let Colleen take care of what Arizona is doing. And I am going to move on to Arkansas, where the founding partner of Arkansas Voters First obtained the signatures of enough people to put that on the ballot, but there were certain requirements that couldn't be met because of COVID, and the court said, okay, well, we'll waive those requirements, but the Secretary of State said, sorry, you did not do a background check on your canvassers, so I won't allow it. So Arkansas is up in 2022 for another try at an independent redistricting. In Virginia, they had 2 state constitutional amendments and 2 that had to be voted on twice by the Virginia legislature. That's how they do ballot initiatives. And it was passed this year. So we can expect Virginia to start a redistricting committee. Missouri passed, as I spoke before, the Amendment 1, and this year in 2018, and then they voted to weaken that in 2020. Not sure why they wanted to do that, but they did. Let's see, we have Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, the governor can veto any of the state legislature maps if he deems it or she deems it to be unfair. In this case, the governor, Tony Evers, has wanted the state to delay the April 2020 primary just to, because of COVID-19, so that they could initiate a ballot voting. And the Supreme Court, which is partisan in Wisconsin, said, no, you can't delay it. People are just gonna have to stand in line and get sick. So that's what happened in Wisconsin, and they did. So we're very proud of Wisconsin. Nevada, the League of Women Voters filed a proposed redistricting initiative for the ballot last time, and actually the Democrats said that it wasn't described properly. The League of Women Voters revised it, but there wasn't enough time to get enough signatures. So that will have to wait until 2022. And New Jersey had a wonderful, New Jersey passed the fact that prisoners would be counted in the census in their home district as opposed to in their incarcerated district where they couldn't vote anyway. And in Kansas, the voters approved a constitutional amendment, 60% to 40% margin, to change the state's redistricting process. And it will now include people where they live day to day, including military and students. So the League of Women Voters is opposed to racial and political gerrymandering. There were 59 million Americans live under minority rule, including a state where the party has fewer votes in the 2018 election, but nevertheless it controls a majority of seats in the legislature. So they're going to keep trying, we're going to keep trying, and they have, the League has started a people-powered fair maps organization, which is focused on redistricting programs of the League and creating fair political maps nationwide. And just so you know, the League issued a statement disapproving of that question about citizenship because it would affect the answers and the count. And because of the League's position and the brouhaha that occurred during that period of time, that question was dropped. And I do not believe that it will come up again, but you never know. But we'll wait 10 years. We have to wait 10 years to find that out. And that is my presentation. I hope that you got a lot out of it. And if there are any questions, let me know.
Thank you very much, Cindy. That was a lot of good information. Things happening all over this country, huh?
Absolutely.
All right. Our next speaker is Colleen Mathis. She was the chair of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission for the last time we went through this process, beginning in 2011. So she's still the chair. She will be the chair until she is replaced by the new chair. Colleen.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay, Vivian and everyone?
I can, yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Yes, I am still technically the chair of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission and have been honored to serve in this position for the past 10 years. Any day now, my replacement will be named because if anyone's following this, the 4 partisan members, the 2 R's and 2 D's, Republicans and Democrats, have now been named for the next commission. And a slate of 5 candidates has been proposed. And I understand that's under litigation right now. So we'll see what happens there. But one of those 5 members or to be named people will be replacing me. So I thought I'd give you a sense, an overview of what it's like to serve on the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission, what my experience was, and I hope inspire you to be engaged with this next commission. It's super important, as you know from our previous 2 speakers, redistricting affects every single one of us. And it's just really important as a citizen of this country to be engaged and pay attention. And I hope I'm going to inspire you to do that. So thanks to the League of Women Voters for having me today and to all of you for listening. I really appreciate you being here. This is the agenda. I'm going to go through things pretty quickly. Those of you who are veterans of these webinars, you will recognize some of these slides. But for those of you new, maybe there'll be something interesting for you to learn here. Thanks to the League of Women Voters, Arizona does have independent redistricting. We're super fortunate as a state, frankly, to have it. There's 35 states right now where the legislature is in charge, as you learned from Cindy's presentation. They're the ones who handle redistricting. But in a handful of states like Arizona and more as the years go by, are adopting this concept of an independent redistricting commission. And this all started back in 2000 with a proposition. Fortunately, Arizona has the ability, its citizens have the ability to bring legislation forward through citizens initiatives. They can draft ballots, draft proposals to get on the ballot. If they get enough signatures and can get it on the ballot and people vote for it, it passes and the Arizona Constitution gets amended. And that's exactly what happened back in 2000. I didn't live in Arizona back then. I moved here in 2001, but fortunately, these 3 citizens you see down there, a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent, got together and drafted a proposition, and thanks to the League of Women Voters and Common Cause, to nonpartisan national organizations, got the grassroots campaign going to help Arizonans learn about this initiative and then ultimately get it passed. And so at that point, Arizona's Constitution was amended to reflect the going forward, this new body shall be created to draw the lines for both congressional and legislative districts. And it passed with 56% of the vote. And in a spasm of good sense comes from Cokie Roberts. She had written about our commission back in 2011, and I just loved that. So anyway, now we have this commission, and I was honored to be the chair of it for the past 10 years. This is what Proposition 106 said. And so this is what voters read and voted on. And I think it's really important to revisit this language. And I encouraged the Commission on Appellate Court Appointments that picks the slate from which the new commissioners will be chosen to remember this language, because the commission's charge is to oversee the mapping of fair and competitive districts. And I seized upon that language personally. To me, that was my role, is to ensure that the commission did exactly this. And that's what I strove to do. That's how I governed in this role. These were the 5 commissioners initially chosen last time around. You can see 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and an independent. That's me. I'm not affiliated with any party. The independent could be a member of the Libertarian Party or the Green Party or any party that is not a Republican or a Democratic Party. So I just happen to be unaffiliated. These 5, we're all volunteers. We are not paid to serve in this role. We filled out an application, submitted a statement, and then were interviewed by various people, and ultimately were chosen to serve. The majority and minority leadership of the state legislature picks the Republicans and Democrats on the panel. Those 4 get together and choose from a slate of 5 independents that have been vetted by the Commission on Appellate Court Appointments to serve as chair. And last time around, I was unanimously chosen as the chair. So the recipe, so to speak, that we follow is all outlined in the Arizona Constitution. These are the criteria that the commissioners must follow when drawing these new districts. And you can see that the first 2 are federally mandated and must be followed by any state and by anyone doing the redistricting. So across the country, this is standard, equal population in all the districts, and we must comply with the US Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. The rest of the criteria listed are things that a lot of the states follow. They're kind of considered standard redistricting principles. The last one, though, is the one that's pretty unique to Arizona. I say pretty unique. I would say it's the only state, but I've heard lately that there may be a state that's using competitiveness as a criterion. And we'll talk about what those features mean. I'm going to explain that in a minute. The 2 big ones to talk about really are communities of interest and competitiveness. And this is what you see. The reason they're so important is they're somewhat ill-defined. What is a community of interest? Well, I can tell you the 5 commissioners that were on our commission, none of us knew exactly what one was. It kind of is in the eye of the beholder. We heard numerous definitions of what a community of interest was. And we wanted to have the public define for us what that meant to them. Now, there are some standard communities of interest that are pretty unassailable, such as a Native American tribe. There's 21 of those in Arizona. They are sovereign nations. They have defined boundaries. That's an obvious one. But the rest are pretty open to negotiation and discussion. So you can see what we heard from some of the folks that came to our hearings to tell us what they were. But these are examples of communities of interest that people presented to us. And then what is competitiveness, that last one, that last criterion? To me, as an political independent, competitiveness means a 50-50 Republican and Democratic voter registration. So if 50% of an area is registered as a Republican and 50% as a Democrat, that's to me a competitive district. So as close to 50-50 as we could get is how I viewed competitiveness. As a political independent, this quote resonates with me, so I got it off Twitter and put it here in this presentation, just because I do believe in competitiveness. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we are to oversee the mapping of fair and competitive districts. That is what the voters voted on. So just to give you a sense of these criteria, how they can actually compete with each other and do compete with each other, the best way to show you is a map. And this map was the approved map drawn by the last commission, because as you know, we're the second commission. The first commission served from 2001 to 2010, then our commission took over. This was the congressional district map for the first commission. And it well illustrates how these criteria compete with each other. One of the criterion, for instance, is compactness and contiguousness. Contiguousness means connected. So you can see District 2 there was drawn over there on the left, but then there's this island in the middle of District 1 that is also a 2 and a line. And that line is a dry wash that connects it to the other part of the majority part of District 2. That little island in the middle of 1 is the Hopi Reservation. For whatever reason, the Hopi came to the commission and said they didn't want to be in the same district, congressional district, as the Navajo Nation. Well, the Navajo Nation completely surrounds them. So it's really, it was a creative approach to accommodate their wishes, respect a community of interest, and yet still comply with contiguousness, not compactness, but contiguousness, because you can see it's no longer a compact district. Those districts in the middle are Maricopa County. They're very compact because there's a ton of population in that one county. And those districts therefore can be smaller geographically because you are able to achieve the equal number of population in those districts very readily because of the density of population. You can see District 1 is very large. It's because that's a mostly rural district. People live few and far between. To achieve the same number of people as some of those districts in the middle, you got to go far and wide. So that just gives you a sense of how these criteria compete with each other, and it's a balancing act, the whole thing. So I really love that map, and I credit the former commission for coming up with a way to respect a community of interest. It was not easy, I would say. Let's put it that way. So to give you a sense of the process, you as citizens are the reason that the Independent Redistricting Commission is successful. You need to be engaged and go to the meetings and participate. And if the next commission does it anything like the previous 2 commissions, there will be many opportunities for hearings, and they'll travel all over the state and ask you what a community of interest is for you, what criteria are especially important to you and why. It's a listening tour, that first round of hearings. And we don't draw any lines, we just listen to folks. And that's what I hope will happen this next time around. The previous commission did it and our commission did it too. It's a big state, so it requires a lot of traveling around, a lot of driving, and it was an honor, frankly, to go to all these communities and listen to what folks were saying. We made it easy for people through our website to engage with us. That's another important factor, and you should pay attention to the next Redistricting Commission's website. This site is still up. It's azredistricting.org. I encourage you to visit it. You can review all of the maps that were submitted to us, all of the testimony we received. It was all transcribed. There's even video footage of our hearings. It's all archived. So you can see everything there. It's the portal to the commission. And it also allowed for people to submit public comment online. So if you can't go to a meeting for whatever reason, but have some input, you can do that online and it becomes part of the record. So please stay tuned for that for this next commission and participate. This is just the process. After we did that listening tour, the second round of hearings began. Actually, we started drawing the maps after that first round of hearings and did those all in public session. People could watch us and adjust the lines. And we were following, again, the recipe, so to speak, that is in the Constitution. And you start with a clean slate. You cannot you can't actually accomplish what Cindy presented, which I had never seen before, that kidnapping thing where an incumbent address is considered, because we actually can't, as the commission, consider where current incumbents live or reside. You start with a clean slate. You don't start with the previous map. So when we start out with nothing, and we draw a grid map according to the Constitution, which just is that map in the upper left, which has equal population in each of those districts and compactness. But then the criteria the commission has to consider, and that's where we start adjusting the lines from that grid map. So the middle map there is, you can see that was our draft map that we actually took out again on a second round of hearings to let the public comment on it and tell us what we did wrong or right, or what they liked and didn't like. And then we met again numerous times to take into account what they said. And you can see that draft map changes to the final map. There's definitely some, Cochise County is now whole down there in the lower right. So there's definitely some big changes that occurred between draft and final. The final map is the one that was approved on January 17th, 2012. That map is still the map until this next commission draws. We were fortunate that despite all the litigation, none of our lines changed over 10 years. So I pause there just to mention, what does independent mean? We're called the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. It does not mean that we are nonpartisan or apolitical. It means we are independent from the legislature. We are a separate body that has equal footing with the legislature only in the power of redistricting the map. So we are equivalent to a legislative body for that one specific role. And it doesn't mean politics is removed from the process. This is inherently a political exercise, and I would argue you cannot remove politics, but you can make it transparent. We have 4 commissioners who have been appointed by majority and minority leadership serving on the panel. And so we're just independent of the legislature. We're not an apolitical body. And I would argue we shouldn't be. You need to have partisan representation and people representing their interests too. They're a big part of the process. So despite that, the governor, if you followed my story, the governor didn't like how the lines were being drawn, and was hearing from a variety of people that the commission wasn't doing a good job, and ultimately ended up calling a special session of the legislature in 2011 to remove me. And this was midstream while we were in the middle of drawing the lines. We didn't even have a draft map yet. So it was a surprise, but fortunately, the Arizona Supreme Court decided to hear the case. Thankfully, we petitioned them to do that, and they did, and reinstated me within 2 hours of the hearing. So it shows how 3 branches of government can work for the betterment of the public. I was very happy anyway. So then we got back to work. As soon as that bump in the road was passed, we got those final maps completed, and then had to submit them to the Department of Justice, because at the time our commission was under pre-clearance, that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act that Cindy referenced. That has been since gutted. There's still, some teeth in the Voting Rights Act through Section 2, but the commission, unless things change, next time around will not have to go through pre-clearance, which does take a lot of time. There's a lot of analysis the DOJ did. And so you can see they approved our maps on April 26th. This was the first time in Arizona history that both maps had been approved on the first try. And it was a goal that I had stated from the beginning. I was hoping that AIRC Commission could achieve that. So we were pretty excited when this letter came. This is the final congressional map, just drawn from a blue, red, and purple being competitive district standpoint. We ended up drawing 4 safe Republican seats, 2 safe Democratic seats because of the Voting Rights Act, and 3 competitive. We had 9 districts this last time around. It's looking like due to population growth, Arizona is going to get a 10th district this time. So we'll see what happens there. We also draw the legislative district map. There's 30 of those. It's a much more complicated map, frankly, and takes longer to get through, but you can see how it turned out. Couple things in terms of results. We had 2 cases that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, independent redistricting does not remove litigation from the process. We had lots of lawsuits filed against us. One was extremely important because, and this was brought by the Arizona legislature against our commission, challenging the constitutionality of having an independent redistricting commission draw congressional district lines. Fortunately, the Supreme Court ruled in our favor, 5-4. It was a split court. And Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually wrote the majority opinion, one of her few majority opinions that she ever wrote. And I encourage you all to revisit that because this had national ramifications. And it is the thing that allows states like Michigan, who just got an independent redistricting commission, and these other states that Cindy talked about, Virginia, others, to actually have independent redistricting. I apologize for my barking dog. Then we had another case, Harris versus IRC. That was a unanimous decision in the commission's favor. And I was very heartened by that because it was about our work product on the legislative district map. And we cleared both those hurdles, as well as 3 other hurdles that we had 3 other major lawsuits. None of them went to the US Supreme Court though, but nonetheless were significant, and the commission prevailed in all 5 suits. So other results, this is where you come into play. Really want you to participate this next time around. We had a lot of participation last time. I hope there'll be even more this time. There may not be in-person hearings given COVID, at least for a while, but nonetheless, you should be dialing in on Zoom, and you're all veterans now of that. So another important way to measure our results is through the elections themselves. You know, we can do all the drawing and analyzing we want, but until you have an election, you have no idea how things are gonna result. This is how things turned out. I told you, we thought we drew 4 safe Republican seats, 2 safe D seats, and 3 competitive. Well, that first round at elections, the Democrats ended up sweeping all 3 seats. There was one district, the district I live in, CD2, and the one I assume many of you do. It's the most competitive district in the nation. It was called by only a 2,454 vote difference. The next time, only 161 votes was the difference between the winner and the loser. So it's a very competitive district. You can see the last 3 years, the Republicans, you know, in 2014 and 2016 won that district. Then the Democrats got it back. So to me, I like to see that, frankly. I like to see the swinging back and forth. To me, it shows it's competitive. The legislative districts this time around, since this last election that we just had, the Senate is now 16 Republicans and 14 Democrats. That's 1 extra Democrat than there was before. And the House has remained the same at 31 and 29. But I like to see that. I think it's pretty balanced. When I joined this merry band, we had 21 Republicans in the Senate and 9 Democrats. And that was how they were able to achieve 60% concurrence to remove me from the commission. So I think a balanced government is a good government. So I like to see what has resulted. Just a couple notes on how to provide useful input. The commission, you know, is just 5 citizens who volunteered to serve. If you decide to provide input, just be authentic and say who you are and who you represent. Be transparent about that. We had people who didn't do that. And when they don't do that, it's obvious, and it also what they're trying to tell us, because you tend not to trust their input. It's best to just be fair. And if you have a partisan interest in something, just say so. That's normal and welcome, frankly. And you should be concise and constructive and be kind and respectful of not only the commissioners, but their staff and also all your citizens that you're with. Everybody should listen and let them have their say, and then you have yours as well. So it's kind of basic, and many of you are veterans of providing public comment, but I just thought I'd mention that. What does the future hold? You heard about the census, the great presentation earlier, and I just think that is sadly become a political football. There's actually a case on November 30th in 9 days that the US Supreme Court is going to hear. It's Trump versus New York. And it's about that whole idea of excluding undocumented immigrants from the count. And so we'll see how that turns out. But that still continues to be an issue, even though the citizenship question was not, they weren't successful in getting that on the census. I mentioned we might get a 10th district, and then SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, could they reverse the gains achieved from that case, the Arizona legislature versus the IRC? We don't think so. Even though the court has changed dramatically, the court, since this ruling, has actually mentioned independent redistricting as a remedy that states can use to go after partisan gerrymandering. So despite the disputes and the dissents during our case back in 2015, things have changed. And I'd like to think that it's gonna remain in force, so we'll see. And then how will this next commission deal with the Voting Rights Act, since the pre-clearance requirement is no longer in force? So lots to watch and be paying attention to as engaged citizens, and be sure to follow along and be present. I just encourage you to be witnesses to this because it's super important. There's a couple other resources I've put up here on the screen. If you like podcasts, there's a very interesting one about Arizona that you might find entertaining. And then a paper I co-wrote where I talk about the lessons learned from Arizona. And you can get all of these online. So I just always close with this because it's a lonely job, I'll say, serving as the chair of the Independent Redistricting Commission. And I've modified a very famous quote from former President Harry Truman, that you should get some kind of pet.
Colleen, thank you very much. That was a lot of good information. What I really liked was you gave information about the last one, as well as the one coming up, so we can know what to do. I have a question from an audience member for Nahrin. Nahrin, I have a couple questions for you. The first question is, was anyone from TUSD or any other school district on the complete count committee?
Yes, TUSD was involved. I didn't have them included on the slide, but we did have Adelita Grijalva and Crystal Ann Foster involved in the complete count committee.
All right. Another question is, how does this year's response rate in Pima County and in Arizona compare with the last census 10 years ago?
So it looks like we had, it was higher than the 2010 census response rate, which was 65.9%. And this year it was 67.6% in Pima County.
All right, thank you. Cindy, I have a question for you about gerrymandering. The question I have is, how could the federal government tell if a state was discriminatory in its voting practices?
They would, the 50%, they would have to have 50% of their non-white, non-English speaking residents more than 50% registered. If they were not registered up to that level, then they were considered discriminatory. And Arizona came in the crosshairs because of all the Latino population in Arizona. All the voting material was in English. Mm-hmm. So that was considered, they didn't register Latinos, and so they were considered discriminatory. They applied that to everybody.
So now the registration materials, the election materials have to be in Spanish and Native American languages, correct?
Correct, correct. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it is, it is. Another question is, why did you say that gerrymandering violated the 14th Amendment's equal protection of the laws?
If you are a minority and you are, your districts are not properly balanced, then you have no say, you have no voice. If you have a properly designed district, then the minority can have influence on the majority. And that puts them in a position where they are protected under the laws because they can express themselves and make a difference. That's how the 14th Amendment works. The other one is the First Amendment, of course, is when you choose your political party, that's your freedom of speech.
All right, thank you. Colleen, I have a couple questions for you too. What new challenges do you see the 2020 Independent Redistricting Commission facing? Colleen?
I think she left.
Oh, I think there was a computer problem with that. All right, well, if she comes back on, we will ask her. Nahrin, here's a question for you. So the US Census Bureau has tried to reassure us that the Bureau is on track to produce a complete and accurate census, and that the 2020 census will count at least 99% of all households in the country, even though the administration shortened the time frame for household counting by a month. Did this happen, that 99% of the households were counted?
Reportedly, yes.
All right.
That's what was reported to us by the Census Bureau.
Okay, all right. Now, even if the Bureau counts the 99% of all households, it doesn't mean the census has collected accurate and high quality data, or that the census is going to be accurate. Can you discuss why this statement is true or false?
I would say that this statement is true. The post-enumeration survey is the survey that measures the quality of the 2020 census and produces the undercount and overcount of the 2020 census. And so that is something that's coming up in the next year.
Okay, good. One other question about Arizona. Did we reach the 99% threshold in Arizona?
Yes, according to the Census Bureau.
Okay, good, good. All right. All right, let me see. Cindy, I have more questions for you. So one question I have is, what are wasted ballots? I've heard that term used in the past. What are wasted ballots, Cindy?
Well, that's when your computer is programmed to slice and dice your state into districts that have just the right amount of one party to win that district. If it's done fairly, you're going to have some districts that have maybe 100 extra votes, 1,000 extra votes. But if you do it, if you are gerrymandering, you slice and dice it so that you don't waste any of those votes, and you put your party in the position where you will win all of the districts by dividing up the population that way. So that's essentially what's called wasted votes. Is if you have too many people to win the district, you've wasted some of your votes.
I see. Not competitive at all.
That's right.
Right. Okay, another question is this. How can you tell if an independent redistricting commission is really independent? Can't the applicants change their party affiliation and lie about their actual affiliation?
Well, that Colleen would probably be able to answer that better than me, but I think that I think that they have, when they go through the application process, I think they weed out people like that. I believe that the current court case that is being administered now, I believe that's because some of these individuals who were chosen as Democrats were actually former Republicans. And I think there's been a little discussion about that. So I was just wondering how they determine it. And I think Colleen would probably be able to answer that better than I.
All right.
Sure.
Yeah, I know that is a question. It's something that the League of Women Voters is watching to make sure that the chair is actually an independent and is independent in their lives too.
Yeah, I don't know. Is the League, you can answer this also, is the League a part of that case, the court case that's underway now?
I don't believe so, but
Okay.
I could be wrong. I'm not sure. I don't see that Colleen is back with us. It must be her computer must have gone down. Those things happen. Nahrin, I have more questions for you. So Nahrin, do we have a report from the census stating the U.S. did reach a 99% count of households, or is it mainly that they just said it?
I don't have a specific report. I just have an email from our representative who assisted us with getting a complete count in Pima County, who informed us that Arizona is now at the 99.9% of the households enumerated.
All right. Well, I guess that's close enough, huh? All right. If we can't count everyone, can we use estimates that people who look at population can use for Arizona? Or do we only use the numbers that are counted?
You know, I wish the census representative was here to answer that question, because I can't say that I know for sure. I don't want to say something that's wrong.
Okay, that's all right. Well, that makes sense. All right. Cindy, I have a couple more questions for you. So how can a state legislature like Florida get away with gerrymandering when the citizens of the state have made it clear how they want their districts to be drawn?
I would say that being a member, in the state, I don't know if the districts have been drawn properly. So the state legislature got away with that, but there are other people looking over shoulders, and they are the ones that are the watchdogs, and they're making sure that everybody complies. I just feel like as a citizen, you just don't know all the ins and outs of this, and so it's very good that we do have those watchdogs and people willing to put up the money to file lawsuits, because the one in Florida was I think $11 billion, and state legislature would not give the plaintiffs would not reimburse the plaintiffs for their legal costs, whereas the state legislature, which was actually the defendant and was against the citizenry, they got repaid, so out of tax money. So it's really it's a catch as catch can, but I'm so glad that we have people like the League and others that are watching this very closely.
And one other question, aren't the courts supposed to be deciding on the basis of law as opposed to their own partisan opinions?
Well, I thought that as well. I just found out recently that there are the federal Supreme Court, I am hoping, is going to follow the Constitution and the laws that have been passed. but the state constitutions are some state constitutions make the Supreme Court of that state partisan. And that is a problem. That's a problem when you're trying to get a fair district. But the court, yeah, it just keeps going up and up and up. And so as long as it goes through the state court first, the federal government will hear it. And it just takes a long time and a lot of money.
That's right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Colleen, you're back with us. Thank you very much. We have many questions for you.
I'm very sorry for that.
Well, you know, in almost every webinar, we have something glitches. It's okay. Everybody,
okay.
all the people in the audience understand that this happens, and it's okay.
All right.
I'm glad
you.
you're back with us.
Me too.
Here's a question. What new challenges do you see for the new independent redistricting commission coming up?
Wow. Well, I would say this issue of the Voting Rights Act, the fact that Section 5 was gutted, how will they handle the voting rights requirement? They still have to comply with the Voting Rights Act.
Mm-hmm.
But I would hope that even though they don't have to go through pre-clearance, they'll still be drawing the majority to, because otherwise, if they don't, they will still be sued if they don't comply. So they're going to need to really be cognizant of that Voting Rights Act requirement, even though Section 5 is gutted. I would say, you know, they have to have thick skin and be prepared to be criticized for all kinds of things, including the stock market dropping, which we were. So there's a lot of critique that you will receive from the members of the public, and you just have to be true to yourself and follow what the Arizona Constitution says that they're supposed to do. So I think if they keep that in mind and do what that says, there'll still be litigation and people who are unhappy on both sides, but they need to stay true and follow through, frankly, and try not to be dragged down into you know, any problems with feeling like they did a bad job or didn't do the right thing. So they just have to understand it comes with the territory, I would say.
That's good advice.
I think so. Yeah, thanks. I don't know. Beyond that, there's probably other areas too, but that's what that comes to mind off the top of my head.
Another question is, some states have professional demographers drawing their maps. Isn't this a non-political solution to fair map drawing?
I would say that the Independent Redistricting Commission can be non-political in that they're hiring a technical consultant to help them. None of us as commissioners were professional map drawers. We had 2 people who were attorneys and 3 non-attorneys serving on our commission, but none of us were someone to do that. And technically, I mean, typically all of these map drawers, these technical consultants, have done work for either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. That's pretty normal. And what you can do, though, is ask them to disclose all of their political history, their clients, who they've worked for. And that's what we did when we were hiring our technical consultant. So our technical consultant happened to have done work mostly for Democrats. They had served Michael Bloomberg, who was an independent at that time. So they had done work for him, but the previous commission hired a consultant that had done only work with Republicans. So I think no matter what, they're going to have a track record and a history working for either side, but that shouldn't matter. If they're good at what they do, they're professionals and they know their role, and that is to follow the guidelines that the commissioners who hired them tell them how to draw the lines. So the commissioners are in charge, they're just directing the technical consultant. So I think that is how you can remove partisanship from it, because you've got 5 commissioners that is, working together to tell the technical consultant how to draw the lines.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question is, if someone sues the commission, who pays for your legal costs?
Great question. Unfortunately, you do. The taxpayers pay for the litigation because we weren't sued personally. We were sued as a body, but we needed to hire representation to help us defend ourselves. And so, and you're funding, of course, the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission. There's an amount allotted to the commission when it starts out, and the commission over time, depending on how much litigation there is, has to keep going back to the legislature to get more funding to defend itself against various lawsuits. So to the extent those can be minimized, you know, all the better for the taxpayers. But unfortunately, we're the ones who pay for that.
All right, well, that's good to know anyway.
And Vivian, I should also mention, we were fortunate that in our two US Supreme Court cases, you need to hire a Supreme Court specialist to go up in front of the Supreme Court. And both of ours, Seth Waxman and Paul Smith, they both served pro bono. So that was, you know, a really lovely thing. Yes, because that could be very expensive.
Exactly. Good for them.
Yeah.
Another question is, CD1 is fairly large geographically. Doesn't it make it difficult for the congressman or congresswoman from that area to cover the entire district effectively?
It does. I joke with my journalist friends who write about the commission. They always use the adjective sprawling whenever they mention CD1. And I will say it is about the same size as the previous commission drew that. The reason for that is what I alluded to earlier. We actually viewed the rural community as a community of interest. To me, rural interests are different from urban interests. And you can make the argument that a rural community, to the extent you can get enough citizens who live in a rural area together into one district, all the better. We actually ended up drawing two pretty rural districts. And one of those is CD1. It is massive. You know, it covers all the Navajo Nation and beyond. And Arizona is just a big state. And in order to get 710,000 people, which was our number, plus or minus, that, you know, into one district and still keep it rural in nature, you have to travel far and wide to get all those people. So that's why it's such a big district. And yes, it does pose a challenge for the representative because if they're going to have to travel around and visit, you know, all over their district. But I would argue that it's worth it by maintaining that rural dominance in that district.
I was very impressed by all the different ways you showed that people can become involved in the process. And that is an extremely important part of the process. And I do hope that the new commission does travel throughout the state and allows people to be part of the process. We have one question, and it says, I went to several of the public hearings as other League of Women Voter members did that I saw, and was pleased that the commission provided handouts of the provisional maps. However, it was clear that several organized and partisan groups were testifying. I was testifying on behalf of the principle of competitiveness, but saw that several of the final districts were obviously Republican or Democrat. Does the commission really pay attention to the comments made in these public sessions?
Yes, it does. And unfortunately, you know, as a political independent, I feel this person's pain because frankly, I would love to draw 9 competitive districts. Now, my partisan, you know, friends wouldn't agree with me there. They want to see, you know, some of their power retained too. So it comes down to there's only so many Republicans and Democrats in the state, and they tend to live, you know, in certain areas. So you can't gerrymander the whole map just to achieve competitiveness. That's not realistic and not right. So at the end of the day, you know, what we really we had to achieve pre-clearance. So we knew we had to draw majority and minority districts that don't retrogress minority rights. So we knew we had to draw 2 in the case of the congressional district map, 2 districts that reflected that. Once you do that, Then there's only minority citizens tend to vote Democratic. That's just the way it is. That means you need to have enough Democrats in those 2 districts so that they can elect the candidate of their choice. That's the operative language. And so once you do that, there's only so many Democrats left in the state, and you need to also follow the other criteria. So that's why we can't just focus on competitiveness, although I would like to. Because of that, you end up drawing, there's going to be some very safe Republican districts. We had that, as I noted, we ended up drawing, if you base it on registration, 4 safe Republican seats. But that also meant we were able to draw 3 competitive ones. So there's a trade-off and a balancing that occurs, and it just happens that's how our map turned out. It'll be interesting to see if this next commission can maybe achieve, if they end up drawing 10 districts, which we think we'll get, can they draw a 4th competitive district based on what population is left over and the dynamics of population, you know, who's moved to the state in the past 10 years and where do they live? So it'll be interesting to watch and see.
And who's moved into the state and where they live too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nahrin, we have one more question for you, and that is, where can we get access to the 2020 census data? Unmute yourself, please.
Would I be able to get back to the person asking this question, or to you all after?
You can you can send it to me, and then whoever asked this question can contact the League of Women Voters office by phone 327-7652, or email us, and we'll get back with you about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to provide the most accurate information, and so I'll make sure that that happens. And if I know that there's going to be some final results coming out in December, and so I'm not sure if we need to wait for then until we have the most accurate results.
I see. And people can contact you at Supervisor Villegas' office, correct?
Yes, I will be there until December 31st.
Okay.
But after that, there will be a new representation.
All right. Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, joining the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson for this voter education program. And thank you so much to Colleen Mathis, Cindy Soffrin, and Nahrin Jabru for sharing your experience with our audience. Now you can view a recording of this program on our Facebook page, the League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson Facebook page. And then after it's edited with basically our names, it will be on our YouTube channel also. And you just put in YouTube, League of Women Voters of Greater Tucson. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I have learned a lot. Thank you so much, and take care. Bye-bye.